Sitting comfortably with the eyes closed. Put your attention on the silent witness. Connect with that silent witness. You are the silent witness. Now, from the perspective of the silent witness, listen to the Yoga Vashishta. Book 3, Chapter 122. Verse 13. Thus, one who has his mind dead in himself learns by practice of years to perform his duties by refraining from his thoughts of external objects. Such a one is said to have attained Turiya, or the fourth state of consciousness. The fourth stage of spiritual elevation, and has become liberated in his lifetime. He is not glad to get anything or sorry to miss it. He lives without fear of accident and is content with whatever he gets. O Ram, you have known whatever is to be known by man. You certainly have extinguished your desire to all actions through life. Your thoughts are all spiritual and transcend the actions of the physical body. Though you are embodied in a physical state. Do not give yourself to joy or grief, but know you are free from decay and defect. Spiritually, you are a pure and bright substance that is omnipresent, ubiquitous, and ever in its ascendancy, devoid of pleasure and pain, and death and disease. Why do you lament at or loss of a friend when you are so friendless in yourself. Being thrown alone in this world, whom do you claim as a friend of your soul? We see only the particles of matter for which this body is composed. It exists and passes away from its place in its time. But there is no rising or falling of the soul. Being imperishable in yourself, why do you fear to fall into nothing? Why think of the destruction of your soul, which is never subject to death? When a jar is broken into, its emptiness is not lost, but mixes with the air. The body being destroyed, the indestructible soul is not lost with it. As the sunlight that causes the appearance of a river in a mirage is not lost at the disappearance of the apparent river, so the immortal soul does not perish upon dissolution of the frail body. There is a certain illusion that raises false appetites within us. Otherwise, the unity of the soul requires the help of no duality or secondary substance in order to be united with the soul unity. There is no object of sense, whether visible, tangible, audible, or of taste or smelling, that can affect the unconnected soul. All things and their powers are contained in the all-powerful and all-comprehensive soul. These powers are displayed throughout the world, but the soul is as void as the empty air. O Raghava, mental deception presents the phenomena of the three worlds, representing diverse forms according to the threefold nature of man. There are three methods of dispelling this delusion of the mind, namely by the tranquility of the mind, by destroying its acts and desires, and by abandonment of acts. Now, what Vasishtha is saying here is basically through the balancing of karmic traces. One destroys the desires that arise in the mind, for they come from karmic traces. Once these desires stop coming up, and there are no more thoughts, there is tranquility of the mind. And when established in the silent witness, we no longer take authorship of any of the acts of the body. It is the body acting on its programs of karmic traces. So these are the three methods of dispelling the delusion of the mind, the great mental deception that somehow we are acting in this world. The world is a crushing mill with its lower and upper stones of the earth and heaven. Our desires are the cords that constantly drag us under it. Therefore, Ram, break off these ropes. Our ignorance of spiritual knowledge, which means not to being connected with the silent witness, ignorant of the silent witness, is the cause of all our errors. But our acquaintance with the silent witness leads us to endless joy and ultimately to Brahman himself. A living being having proceeded from Brahman and traveled over the earth at pleasure. In the end, turns to Brahman through his knowledge of it. From all things have sprung from one being who is perfect joy itself, inconceivable and without decay in its nature. All these things are like the rays of that light, or like the light of that everlasting fire. These are like lines on the leaves of trees, and like the curls and waves on the surface of waters. They are like ornaments, made of that gold, and like the heat and cold of fire and water. Thus, the three worlds exist in the thought of the divine mind. It has sprung from the mind of God, and it rests in that same state with the all-comprehending mind. This mind is called the Brahman, who is the soul of all existence. He being known, the world is known also. As he is the knower of all, he gives us the knowledge of all things. Thus, this pervasive being is explained to us by the learned with labels like soul, intellect, and Brahma, used both in scriptures and popular language. The pure notion that we have an everlasting being, apart from all ideas, from physical senses and impressions, is called consciousness and soul. This consciousness or intelligent soul is much more transparent than the ethereal sky. It is the fullness that contains the plenitude of the world as a disjoined and distinct reflection of itself. The knowledge of the unreal reflection of world is a separate existence, is the cause of all our ignorance and error. But the view of their existence in the mirror of the Supreme Soul blends them all to myself also. Now, Rama, you have a bodiless soul of the form of pure consciousness. You can have no cause to fall into the error of being sorry for or afraid of the vanities of the world. How can the unembodied soul be affected by the passions and feelings of the body? It is only the ignorant and unintelligent who are subject to vain suspicions about unrealities. Even the indestructible consciousness of the unintelligent is not destroyed by the destruction of their bodies. How then should the intelligent be afraid of their dissolution? Consciousness is irresistible in its course and roves about the solar path. It is the intellectual part that makes the man, not the outer body. The soul called the inner person, Purusha, whether it abides in the body or not, and whether it is intelligent or otherwise, never dies upon the death of the body. Whatever miseries you meet with in this transient world, they all appertain to the body and not to the intangible soul or consciousness. The intellectual soul is removed from the region of the mind. It is not approached by the pleasure and pains affecting the body and mind. The soul that has curbed its earthly desires after the dissolution of its prison house of the body flies to its seat in the spirit of Brahman, in the same manner as a bee lying hidden under the cover of lotus petals in the darkness of the night, takes to its heavenward flight by the dawning light of the day. My life is known to be frail and a living state, to be a transient scene. O Rama, what is lost by the loss of this prison house of the body. And what is it that you mourn for? Think therefore, O Ram, on the nature of truth and mind, and not about the errors of ignorance. Be free from your earthly desires and know the sinless soul to be void of all desire. The intellectual soul being tranquil and transparent. A mere witness of our doings without any doing or desire of its own. Receives the reflection of the God without desire. Just as a mirror reflects the images of things. The soul, being, as said before, a translucent particle, reflects the images of all worlds in itself. Like a polished gem reflects the rays of light in its bosom. The relation between the detached soul and the world is like that of a mirror and its reflection. The difference and identity of the soul and the world are of the same kind. All activities of living beings have a free play within the rising sun. So the duties of the world are fully discharged by the rising of consciousness. As soon as you get rid of your error of the substantiality of the world, you come to the consciousness of being a vacuum, resting in the Spirit of God. As the nature of a lighted lamp is to spread its lights all around, so the nature of mental philosophy is to enlighten us with the real state of the soul. Now we continue established as the silent witness. Watch the conscious thinking mind and start the mantra. Let the mantra go as it dives deep in consciousness to touch the individual karmic traces and balance them that have been enlivened by this reading of the Yoga Vasishta. Jai Gurudev.